What if I told you that the very things that make us human, our ability to talk, to imitate, to understand each other, aren't actually hardwired into our genes? That's the absolutely radical idea in Cecilia Hayes' book, Cognitive Gadgets, and honestly, it turns everything we thought we knew about the human mind on its head.
So let's just dive right in with a huge question. Think about your own mind for a second. Your ability to chat with friends, to get what they're thinking, to copy a new dance move. Do you think those skills were basically pre-installed in your brain when you were born? A kind of gift from evolution? Or is something else going on entirely?
For a very long time, the dominant view in science has been that these uniquely human abilities are cognitive instincts baked into our DNA. And, it kind of feels right, doesn't it? That we're just born with the fundamental software we need to become who we are. But what if that whole intuitive idea is just wrong? Cecilia Heyes argues that it is. And that brings us right to the heart of the matter we're exploring today. Is the human mind a collection of instincts we inherit? Or is it something more like a toolkit, assembled from a bunch of culturally forged gadgets? Okay, let's put these two big ideas side by side. On one side, you've got the classic cognitive instincts theory. This says our brains come with all this amazing software for language and empathy already installed, thanks to our genes. But on the other side, Hayes is proposing the cognitive gadgets theory. This says, no, those skills are not pre-installed. They're more like apps that we build ourselves as we grow up, pieced together through social interaction, using a much more basic, general-purpose operating system. So what exactly is a cognitive gadget? Well, Hayes defines it as a thinking tool that we aren't born with. Instead, it's a contrivance. It's something that gets assembled piece by piece as we grow up, and it's shaped almost entirely by our culture and our social lives. This is a huge shift in thinking. The bottom line is, our minds are built, not born.
Now, this doesn't mean we're born as complete blank slates. Not at all. Hayes argues that our genes do give us something, but it's not a bunch of complex instincts. It's more like a basic starter kit of raw materials.
So what's in this starter kit? A few really key things. First, we have a super strong drive to be social. Second, our brains are biased to pay extra attention to human faces and voices. Third, we have a souped-up capacity for what's called associative learning, which is really just a fancy way of saying we're amazing at connecting the dots between things. And finally, we get upgraded executive functions. That's the brain's CEO, in charge of planning and self-control. Notice these are all general-purpose tools, not complex, ready-made instincts. And here's the crucial point. Our genetic inheritance isn't some brand new, magical set of human powers. As Hayes puts it, when you compare us to our primate ancestors, we just have more of the same. In other words, we have a refined, upgraded version of the basic mental machinery that a lot of other animals already have. Okay, so let's see how this starter kit actually lets us build our very first complex skill, imitation. We all tend to think of copying other people as just a basic instinct, right? But Hayes argues it's one of the first and most important gadgets we ever construct. To get why imitation is actually really tricky, we need to understand something called the correspondence problem. Think about it for a second. How does your brain translate the visual information of seeing me wave my hand into the motor commands needed for you to wave your hand? You see my movement, but you feel your own movement. How are those two completely different things connected in your brain? So how do we solve this puzzle? Well, Hayes argues we literally forge the connections through experience, building this imitation gadget in 4 main ways. It starts with simple self-observation, like a baby just watching its own hands move around. Then, and this is huge, our parents and caregivers imitate us, mirroring our facial expressions back to us. Cultural tools, like mirrors, let us see our own actions we couldn't see otherwise. And finally, things like dancing or marching together in a group reinforce these links between seeing and doing over and over again. This is our culture in action, building our minds. A mirror isn't a natural part of the environment. It's a cultural invention. A parent sitting there intensely mirroring their baby's gurgles and smiles, that's a learned cultural behavior. And these are the very experiences that literally build the neural pathways that allow us to imitate. And here's the twist. The whole idea that imitation is innate was mostly based on these famous studies from the 70s that claimed newborns could copy adults sticking their tongues out. But get this, a massive, really rigorous study in 2016 completely debunked this. It turns out, newborns don't imitate at all.
What looked like imitation was just babies sticking their tongues out whenever they saw something interesting. It could be a face, it could be flashing lights. The bottom line, imitation is learned. All right, so if imitation is a gadget we build, what about something even more complex? Let's look at mind reading. Now, this is our ability to figure out what other people are thinking and feeling. And just like imitation, Hayes makes the case that this isn't an instinct, it's a skill we are taught. This is such a powerful analogy. Think about it. Nobody claims we have a reading instinct. We all know it's a culturally invented skill that takes years of hard work and instruction to learn. Hayes suggests we need to think about mind reading in exactly the same way. It's like becoming literate, but for the mind. And this comparison is actually pretty revealing. People often point to things like specialized brain areas or developmental disorders like autism as proof that mind reading must be an innate instinct. Well, take a look at reading, a skill we all agree is culturally taught. It has the exact same features. Learning to read creates its own specialized brain area, and there are genetically linked disorders like dyslexia that specifically impair it. This really suggests that these features are not proof of a genetic instinct at all.
So, is there any hard proof? Well, an amazing natural experiment happened in Nicaragua, where deaf children invented a new sign language from scratch. Researchers found that a later group of kids who learned a more developed version of the language that included more words for mental states like think and believe became way better at mind-reading tasks than the first group. This is pretty compelling evidence that our ability to mind read is built by the language and the concepts our culture teaches us. So let's pull all this together because it leads to a really profound conclusion. The idea of cognitive gadgets isn't just about learning new skills. It suggests that culture fundamentally constructs the very way we think. This slide gets to the absolute core of the whole idea. Traditionally, we think of culture as providing the grist for our mental mill, the content of our thoughts, like our beliefs, our stories, our knowledge. But Hayes's radical insight is that culture also builds the mills themselves, the actual cognitive machinery we use for thinking, our tools for imitation, for language, for mind reading. Those are the mills, and they are constructed by our culture. And these culturally built gadgets are what truly make us special. As Hayes says, they are incredibly powerful, and they're exactly what allows us to build complex societies, to pass knowledge down through generations, and to live these strange, peculiar, amazing human lives that we do. They are not gifts from our genes, but creations of our collective culture. So we end with this final thought. If our minds aren't fixed by our genes, but are instead assembled by our social world, that forces us to think really hard about the kind of culture we're creating right now. In an age of social media, of constant digital interaction, of incredibly rapid change, what kind of cognitive gadgets are we forging for ourselves and for the next generation? What kind of minds are we building for the future?